The United Nations instruments provide the foundation of the international legal framework for gender equality. In its first article, the 1945 Charter of the United Nations declares that one of the UN founding goals is to encourage respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. The 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as a legally binding document on a customary basis, states that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, language, sex, or religion. There are also the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights, both of which introduce a general prohibition of discrimination in respect of the rights they regulate. The following UN instruments are directly related to the topic of women's rights: the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Convention for the Suppression of the Traffic in Person and of the Exploitation of the Prostitution of Others, the Convention on Consent to Marriage, minimum age for marriage and registration of marriages, the Convention on the Nationality of Married Women, and the Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women. The international framework for gender equality is further developed through the instruments of the Council of Europe, an international organization founded in 1949 to achieve greater unity among its members based on fundamental values such as democracy, human rights, fundamental freedoms, and the rule of law. The organizations carry out its core activities through the adoption of conventions and treaties, for example, recommendations and other legal instruments such as declarations, action plans, and guidelines. The European Convention on Human Rights and its protocols, for example, the established mechanism of its application and enforcement developed around the European Court of Human Rights, are without a doubt the most significant such instruments for the protection of human rights, as well as independent monitoring mechanism. Among these is the Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence against Women and Domestic Violence as serious violations on human rights, and the key outcome of the Council of Europe's work on gender equality. The main aspects of this convention are the prevention of violence, the protection of victims, and the prosecution of perpetrators. Furthermore, the convention is the first international treaty to define gender as socially constructed roles, behavior, activities, and attributes that a particular society considers appropriate for women and men. This definition implies that there are also socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a particular society considers appropriate for women and men, as well as awareness that certain rules or stereotypes produce unwanted or harmful practices and contribute to the acceptance of violence against women. The convention listed among the primary prevention measures as a general obligation to prevent violence, the duty to take necessary actions to eradicate prejudice, customs, traditions, and other practices based on the idea of women's inferiority or stereotypical gender roles. At the same time, the Convention calls for a gendered understanding of violence against women and domestic violence to serve as the foundation for all victim protection and victim support measures. The international framework for gender equality is complemented by the European Union's legal framework, which includes funding treaties and implementing instruments such as directives on various aspects of gender equality, promotion, and protection. Gender equality, for example, is recognized as one of the EU's fundamental recognized common values in the Treaty on European Union. Therefore, gender equality has become not only relevant for existing members, but also one of the criteria for determining whether a country may become an EU candidate and thus a pathway for countries aspiring to EU membership. The actual application of the gender equality principle is the responsibility of the EU complex institutional framework, including the European Commission, European Parliament, the Court of Justice of the European Union, the Council of the European Union, the European External Action Service, and the European Institute for Gender Equality. The Bosnia-Herzegovina Constitution, which does not contain explicit provisions relating the equality of women and men, but establishes the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms as one of the pillars of the constitutional system, is the most important for the constitutional and legislative framework for gender equality in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Bosnia-Herzegovina Constitution states that enjoyment of the rights and freedoms provided for in the Constitution or in the international agreements listed in the Annex 1 to the Constitution shall be secured to all persons in Bosnia-Herzegovina without discrimination. The prohibition of discrimination expressly includes the prohibition of discrimination based on sex. It is important to note that the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms and additional protocols apply directly to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Article 2 of the Bosnia-Herzegovina Constitution regulates that, and also Annex 1 lists additional agreements on human rights that are directly applicable in Bosnia-Herzegovina, including the Convention on Elimination of all forms of discrimination. Entity constitutions and the Statute of Brčko district additionally affirms the principle of gender equality protection, which is further developed through the law of gender equality in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Bosnia-Herzegovina election law, and the law on prohibition of discrimination in Bosnia-Herzegovina. The aforementioned laws also establish the institutional mechanisms in charge of gender equality, which includes the Agency for Gender Equality of Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Bosnia-Herzegovina Gender Center, the RS Gender Center, as well as the Bosnia-Herzegovina Institution of Human Rights Ombudsman, as the central institution for protection against discrimination. The bodies responsible for gender equality have been established within the framework of the legislative power at the Bosnia-Herzegovina and entity levels, namely the Committee on Gender Equality of the House of Representatives of Bosnia and Herzegovina Parliamentary Assembly, the Committee on Gender Equality of the House of Representatives of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina Parliament, the Committee on Gender Equality of the House of Peoples of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina Parliament, and the Committee on Equal Opportunities of the RS National Assembly. The mandates of these bodies are established by the rules of procedures of the legislative bodies within which they operate, and most pertain to supervision in the field of gender equality and women's rights. Gender action plans, special sectorial policies, and affirmative measures are the most common forms of public policy in the field of gender equality in Bosnia and Herzegovina.